Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Anatomy of the Church and State. I am your host, Jeremiah Campana, and today I am joined by a former track star who won silver at the U.S. Championships turned Christian author. His journey from the racetrack to the written word has equipped him to confront the cultural and political challenges facing Christianity today. In a world that is increasingly hostile to biblical values, I invited him on the show to offer us some insights, encouragement, and practical steps for how we as believers can stand firm, engage the culture, and advance God's truth in the public square. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Izaic Yorks. Izaic, thank you so much for joining me today, brother.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Got a chance to listen to your show quite a while, and this topic is really important now, especially we're seeing this intersection of, well, it's always been there, right? Intersection of faith and politics, but in a world that's becoming increasingly like people are worshiping politics. It's a more important conversation than ever before.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a topic that really never goes away. I think there's always there's a balance between us as Christians and our callings and politics, and those worlds collide quite often. But my friend, walk us through this journey. Right, this is quite a switcheroo. I think. Right, you're going from track star to a fiction author. Right, writing fantasy novels. What sparked that transformation? Kind of walk us through that journey.
Well, Jeremiah, if you went back and talked to my friends growing up and told them that I was going to have a 7-year career as a professional athlete, they would have laughed at you, because I was the kid who was always, in drama, drawing, writing stories. So I would say that going professional athlete was the strangest thing part of my life so far. But no, it's always been a part of who I've been. Gosh, even as a professional athlete, training for, track, doing the 1500, you would think, oh, that's just a mile. You're only training a few miles here or there. It's not that much. But I could tell you every Sunday, that was a long run day, and I was doing between 20 and 25 miles, and my mind was just running with stories always. So it's always been there.
Gotcha. So it really wasn't. The track star part of it was the most surprising thing, you said, from what your friends would say. So you've pretty much been called to be an author for quite some time, it sounds like.
I think so. I think that when we are formed, we are born with innate abilities. There's things that God intended us to do, and I do think that somewhere, I don't know if it's exactly writing or what it is, but some element of that imaginative, speculative world is definitely a part of that calling. But yeah, I mean, to get into the weeds on it a little bit more, going into track and field, it is a story in itself, right? If you think about it, like, I was always thinking about the narratives of, you have individuals going through, and what is the story that they're bringing, and then also what is the story that they're telling through their career. So it's not too crazy a segue if you think of it that way, right? It's like,
right,
the continuation. Like, all of our experiences are stories that God is writing and unfolding. So
Amen. What kind of challenges were you facing in the competitive world of track and field? I've had a chance to talk to former athletes at Ohio State, and just kind of being surrounded by secular culture in the locker rooms and stuff like that. How did what challenges did you face, and how did those experiences influence your perspective on culture?
Oh gosh, so. There's a lot to unpack, right?
Right.
I think that probably the biggest thing is there is when you're at a professional level, and I think it's probably the same, whether it's just to make it relatable, right? It's not just professional athletics, but you can find it in high levels of business with CEOs or whatever it is you're doing. It's anything at that high level. I think that there's a lot of temptation there, right?
Mm.
Anywhere where there's lots of success, where there's lots of money, um, there's a temptation to walk off the path. So we see it. Football has a lot of cameras on it, right? And so you see what happens with ballers and that stuff more. But it's all the same. It's the same in
Mm.
track, right? So I remember one of the very first stories when I first signed. And I'm glad that this didn't happen to me, but um, was I signed and we had a really great veteran athlete on the team, and we were talking about different meets in different places in the world, and he was like, "Oh, there's this really good race that everyone wants to go do, and it's out in Dubai." And then he tells me about it and about how the bike paths are made of marble and there's all this prize money. And then he lowers his voice and he goes, "And when we got home, when we get back to the hotel, the race director had tons of girls just waiting right in the room for you."
Right.
So I never had that level
Okay.
of that sort of an experience. But if you bring that down a peg, right, it's you get a lot of people who work really hard, and it's delay gratification, delay, 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 and
Mm.
then the culture is let your hair down, indulge. It's really giving into hedonism, and so it's kind of
Mm.
like that play work balance. But question mark is that really play, or is it you've gone too far? And but like I said, I think that's in anything that's high performing, especially in the U.S. culture.
Right.
Um, so
Yeah, we tend to indulge ourselves quite a bit, right? Whether it's food or Netflix or video games, you name it. Americans love to go all in on it. So I guess you said there was a lot of temptation, when you're at that high level. What about your experience in maybe being a good influence on your teammates? Did you have opportunities to share the gospel? Maybe rub some biblical values off on some of your teammates?
yeah, so I'd like to think so. I probably won't ever know until someone reaches out to me.
Sure.
But to I think to give this better context, I have to kind of like step back so you can kind of understand.
Okay.
I wasn't raised in a household where faith was a part of it. So I was actually in college running D1 at the University of Washington. I was a convert to Christianity, and so by the time I was in running professionally, I was halfway in, halfway out of this world of Christian principles where I really believed it. I believed it was real, but I didn't know exactly um, how to live it in the same way that I think some people maybe feel that conviction if they're raised
Mm.
in it. All I knew was I remember the time when I wasn't Christian. I remember the time when I became Christian, and so I was seeing the sides of like, hey, when people come in and they try to like be this good influence and they try to tell me the gospel, it just doesn't come off well most of the time. It pushed me away as a kid. So
Interesting.
I maybe struggled a little bit with like, how much do I share this?
Hmm.
Especially in the sport world, a lot of it, there's plenty of people who believe, but a lot of it's like very salt of your brow, your work. What place does God really have in it? So how do I share that? And so for me, a lot of it was actually by example. It was, hey, the team wants to go out and have a good time, really like have that community, but maybe they want to do it at a burlesque show, right? So it's
Hmm.
like I can't do that because, well, I don't think it's right. But also, I'm married, and marriage is so important, right? And so,
Hmm.
I think a lot of it was like kind of that silent protest, that show of what I hope is what small amount of virtue that I had, and hopefully I've grown a little bit and letting that kind of affect others. So,
Yeah, I think you can't really underestimate. I think it's a balance, personally, right? You can't really underestimate your actions and the effect they have on people, as well as the words. Not everybody's calling might necessarily be to knock door to door and have you heard about Jesus? Have you heard the good news? Maybe you just have people looking up to you, and the way you act could affect them just as much as me speaking the gospel to you, right? And then maybe someone comes up to you later on in life and says, "Hey, remember that time we went to the burlesque show and you didn't go? That really, and you said important marriage was important. That really stuck with me." And then maybe they ask you about Jesus. I think all that comes together and is very important. Now, do you face any similar challenges as an author? Are the challenges different? Tell us about that world that you're in now.
That world is pretty challenging. It's not really challenging for me at this point, but what I see is it's a challenge to let your voice be heard in that world. Um, as we know, like if you look at one doesn't have to look very far. You could look at some of the Disney movies, right, to see where
Mm-hmm.
some of the writing or some of the messages are going. And I'm just picking fun of Disney just because it's an example everyone knows, but that
Right.
sort of very left leaning kind of there's a lot of ideology in there, very materialism focused. That has swept over a lot of the arts, and so the challenge is not really like, oh, that you're a Christian and can you make a good mark there. The challenge
Mm-hmm.
is different in that, can you get your voice heard? And do you have there's a lot there it's a lot easier to say nothing and then maybe in the same way let your writing write by example. um, but it's you'll see a lot of like, then there's plenty of Christians who like keep the fact that they have their faith in play. They'll make that known, but there's a lot who are like, oh, I think I'll take that off because I don't want to get kind of pushed to the side. So I think there's a little bit of, in general, in that world, a bit of a courage
Mm-hmm.
problem that's a bit tough. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense. I can imagine, it's like, hey, do I, and tell me if I'm off base here, but it sounds like what you're describing is, I might write something, waste my time, not get paid unless I scale back the message a little bit.
mhm. Yes, yeah. So you scale back the message. Maybe you kind of let go of some values that you have. But hey,
Mm,
like you said, you spent all this time working on it. You want to get paid for it. There's an easier way to scale it and make money and recoup that time, right? Um, but what's the slippery slope on that? Once you start
right.
doing that, how much easier is it to do that with other things? And at some point, you have to stand your ground on something.
Agreed. Agreed. So, tell us about that. Have you been put in that situation where you've had to stand your ground on something?
Yeah. So when I was first starting to move into the world of independent publishing, um, which really is running your own business more than anything, I did hit that inflection point where I was looking around, I was learning a lot, and I was seeing a lot of Christians saying, don't bother putting that you're a Christian author. If you do that, just even not even the fact that you're a Christian author, like you're going to get censored for that alone. But we have all these movies that came out, like the God's Not Dead movie, that are just so cheesy, so corny.
Right.
And so even a Christian's going to see that and say, I don't want anything to do with a Christian author, right? Um, and so it sounds so silly, but I sat with that and I was like, well, is this something where it matters if I say what I'm for? And I'm kind of the opinion that uh, if you stay true to no matter what you are, if you stay true to what you're doing, people are going to sniff out the real you eventually. And
Hmm.
so, is it better just let it be known up front or not? And so I sat and I actually went through a Saint Ignatius discernment on that, and walked away with like, hey, you know, am I doing this for myself to begin with, or is this something that I feel like the Lord's going to put on my heart to do? Um, And obviously it's the latter. So why would I be ashamed to say, this is what I do? I do this, for the Lord. This is, yes, I love it, but ultimately this is the thing behind it. And, if you substitute the Lord's name in for anyone else, right? Like, let's just say like you were making a Mother's Day card and someone walked up and was like, "What's that for?" And you're like, man, that would be really rude to your mother to do, right? To be like, I do not say that, right? So if I'm really honoring the Lord, it's like, I'm just going to say it, I'm doing it for that. So, but that's easy to say. And you see a lot of people back away from that.
That's unfortunate. And I'm hoping the tide, and kind of give me your feel like where you're at or where we're at as Christians in the arts here in 2025, because I'm with that, right? Like for the longest time, it was these movies were so cheesy and awful. The acting, the writing, just, it was all so bad. Even the ones that made it into movie theaters weren't that great. And now we kind of have, Angel Studios, putting some things out, not necessarily even Christian movies, just movies that are clean and fun and have positive messages in them, and oftentimes directed by Christians that, are you sensing like a shift and maybe we're getting better at this art thing, or are we still kind of stuck, in the corniness of the past?
Yeah. So 100%, I think that there is a shift. There is, I'm going to get a little nerdy here with you, but even just outside of the Christian's perspective, there is this idea of different zeitgeists. And so you have these 4 zeitgeist turnings in storytelling, where you start with this really optimistic, proud of the current age, where take like Lord of the Rings. You have this beautiful kingdom, and then it starts to crumble and go away. So then that leads to a new zeitgeist in storytelling, where people get a little bit disgruntled. And so that's a more pessimistic version of storytelling. Then you move into the third, and that is a little bit more rebellious. And finally, after the dust settles, you come into the fourth zeitgeist, which is you're looking back to that first turning of the age where things were really good. And I think that's where we are. I think there's a lot of people who were moving away from, in fantasy, grimdark fantasy, where things are a bit nihilistic, nothing has meaning, to people are starting to look back to that first turning of like, this was when the kingdom was really great. This is when people had virtues, and we're seeing a lot more of that. So even just outside the Christian perspective, that's happening. I'm seeing it in what people want in books. But then I think that is allowing Christians to have a moment to retell and get back to maybe a place where they can have more presence. We're seeing more people actually looking for Christian storytelling, or things that are right adjacent to it, like Arthurian storytelling, which pulls on a lot of Christian virtues. But then also, I do want to kind of push a little and say, we were never not good at storytelling, really. Like, it's always been in our bones to be storytellers. Like,
Okay.
the imagination and stories that come straight from God. And, this is just my personal take. It might be a hot take, but when we look back to, when we had cathedrals were being built, there was this huge push on iconography, having beautiful things that was very much intertwined with the church. And I do think that once we, no matter where you sit, whether you're a big fan of the separation into orthodoxy and into Protestantism, that pull away started to, I think, separate out that kind of unity that was going into creating beautiful things, creating art and architecture and things that told stories in another way. And I don't think it's an accident that we're starting to see more common ground amongst Catholicism, Orthodoxy, Protestantism, and seeing also at the same time this resurgent in beautiful stories. And I think too, like, there's a lot of people our age who just saw the God's Not Dead movie and were like, okay, we need a shift.
For sure. I think, that argument can definitely be had that the split, like you were talking about, I don't know if that's necessarily a hot take or a very thoughtful take, because I didn't think about it until just now. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, you could definitely make that argument, that the split kind of split, our away from building nice things. And I see people posting on X about that stuff all the time. Like, look at how our churches used to look. And now they're, basically in a strip mall and look like, any, run of the mill box store. Like it's just bizarre, where our architecture has gone. And it's kind of a direct reflection of how we do art. You had, mentioned, the challenges of both, being an author and a track athlete. Kind of share with us, what lessons from both careers do you apply to the endurance needed to fight, the culture war as a Christian, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, but I think the number one thing is patience. So, oftentimes when I think of patience, I think of patience. I'll get the vision of Christ walking with the crucifix on his back as he's dragging it, the patience to walk, to bear, to make it. And so, with track, with professional athletics, it's, you don't know what's coming at the end. All you know is that you have to do the work and you have to be patient to see where the fruits come. And the same with being in publishing or creating arts. You never know if anyone's who's reading it. Like, you can see that some people are reading it, but is it making a difference? Is it not? Will you be able to take care of your family off of it? Are you helping the Lord? You might not ever know that answer till you're in heaven, till you're a saint, right? So it's having the patience to bear the minutia of each day and every moment. And I think that's been the biggest thing that's helpful. And it's also something that I don't know if people practice that enough, but I think if you had, a lot of times we want that instant gratification of seeing like this action that I'm doing is having this effect on the culture. But I'm going to take the example of the family, right? One of the best ways to change culture starts in the family. And so you see this with the Holy Family. It's not like the Holy Family's in the Bible all that much as an integrated group, and yet the silent, strong pillar of Joseph, Mary, Jesus as a baby, them being all together, sets the tone for a lot of Jesus's life and his ministry, in many ways. And same way, like, families set the tone for the culture that is going to be proliferated, but you're never going to see that right away. That's going to take forever. So having the patience to know, like, if you've been called to do something, which I think we all have a calling that has a downstream effect on culture. It's just, is it small or big? You have to have the patience to let that play out and to trust in the Lord on that.
That's good. That's good. Patience. In a world of TikTok videos and instant gratification everywhere you look, that is definitely a virtue I think many of us lack, including many of us Christians. I mean, you just can't help yourself, right? You got food on demand. You're doom scrolling posts on social media. That's a tough one to practice. Any tips on how Christians can practice better patience?
Oh, absolutely. And just as an aside, right? Like, on patience too. Stripping away people's patience, you have to imagine that that's one of the devil's best tactics. Because when our patience is stripped away and we don't sit with our thoughts in silence, suddenly we're not praying, we're not in communion, we're not listening to the voice of God. And then he has his way with us. He has his way with our culture. But I digress. That's an aside. This is so simple, and yet I still think you hear it time and time again. I think the answer is rooting your life in prayer. I think that is the answer. So I think a lot of people pray, but I don't think a lot of people have an actual habit of prayer. And I recommend, like personally, I would recommend having it a bit like a regiment. And so, you start your day with the prayer. If you can, you do a midday prayer, and you close out the day with a prayer. When you're in the car, just spend the first 2 to 3 minutes. Don't have anything on. Just pray and listen. Prayer is the beginning and the end of our Christian life here. Like, it's what forms us. It's how God works into our souls. If we don't have that, something else is going to get there. And it'll probably be that TikTok video. It'll be that other thing. So, but gosh, if we are through prayer, I think a lot of us are formed even more into the saints we're supposed to be. And if we are that, culture is like, that's nothing. We got that.
Man, that's good. And I feel like that, that resonates with me, because I literally used to be so regimented in my prayer life, especially after I got sober in 22. And then we moved to a rural community, and the house we bought, we just have, my wife got pregnant, and then everything in the house started falling apart, days after closing on the house, and just all this craziness. And my prayer life has kind of taken that back seat. And you're right. Like I notice the difference from being regimented with it and kind of like putting it off, because like, oh, I'm so busy. I got all this stuff going on and just all this craziness. And that is definitely the enemy. That is definitely the enemy working on us for sure. For sure. So that's funny you said that, my friend. That's funny you said that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And the enemy doesn't like that. He doesn't like prayers, right? Like that you start to do that. And the moment you start doing that, I would say don't be surprised if you start to feel pushback. So like my wife, I had been feeling for a very long time, and I am Catholic. So, and so, us, we love our rosaries, but I had said, hey, I for days I was like, she needs to be praying the rosary. She like, this isn't me. So I finally told her, and she was like, that's the funniest thing. I have felt like I've been being told to pray the rosary too. And the moment she started doing that, she had immediate pushback. Every time she would go to pray the rosary, and she would get hit by dizzy spells that would knock her to the ground. And just things like that, right? And after a couple days of doing that, in the Catholic world, we call that the battering ram, because you are taking a prayer, and you are, we would say that the devil doesn't like any part of the New Testament, doesn't like any of it, doesn't like what Jesus did, but really hates the fact that God chose to work through a human being to put a baby in there that was the start of his downfall. So it's like a battering ram to just slam into him over and over again. And so after a few days of that, it went away. But yeah, in the beginning, when she started that, it was just like spiritual attack after spiritual attack that was like having physical effects on her. So.
Yeah, I think Christians, especially, new believers, once they convert, I think they don't expect, and maybe is this our fault as not being good disciples or good at discipling others, because new Christians come in and they think, I think a lot of them think it's going to be sunshine, lollipops, and roses, and it's like, actually, you're going to get spiritually attacked quite often now.
Yep. Did you ever see the Babylon Bee?
Yes.
The Babylon Bee did this like this script skit thing where they were all pretending to be the apostles, and they were dancing around the fire, and they were like, dude, what if I told you that we are gonna get crucified upside down? And it was so funny talking about all the benefits of being Christian.
Yeah, and it's all like them getting martyred. Yeah, that was a great skit. But so true. It's like no one really tells you that, but you got to be prepared for it. You have to be prepared for it. Tell us, Isaac, in your writing, how do you approach storytelling to communicate biblical truth in a way that resonates with the secular world, right? You had mentioned that maybe, evangelism for you might be your actions. I imagine some of that now is with your writing. So tell us about how you're doing that.
Yeah, totally. So that context I gave you of not coming from a Christian family really weighs heavily into that. Um, and the way I look at it is there are two main camps where specifically fantasy and sci-fi come from. You have, Daddy Tolkien and you have C.S. Lewis. And both they're very writing great, beautiful stories with, Christian biblical truths, but they do it in very different ways, right? Tolkien creates this whole world that's interwoven with faith, but none of it is said. It's in the characters' actions, it's in the world, it's in the truths that they seek. C.S. Lewis very much feels like he's on a pulpit half the time. And so when I read both of those as kids and as teenagers, okay, even now, much to my friends hate this, but I can't stand C.S. Lewis. Which is, I hate him. I just
that's the hot take. Him. That's the hot take. You said earlier you had hot take. That's the hot take of the day right there.
Yeah, that's true. That is the hot take. I respect him, but cannot stand him. And it's because things are so thinly veiled that I just see right through it. So I will walk that back and say, I really enjoy C.S. Lewis's works that are essays, where it's oh, I'm here, I'm getting information. Whereas the other ones, I'm getting a story that's being used as a mess. Yes. So gotcha. You can imagine I don't come from that. I come from that Tolkien background where, okay, we're going to set up a world. I think I am a little bit of a product of our time. So I am okay with not necessarily having this somewhat idealistic world. I'm okay with having those shades of truth of oh, I will write a character in there that curses and, is very off color. Because you are going to actually encounter people in situations like that. And I think storytelling is a way to get at truth, both truth that you can see and feel, but also a truth that's beyond, you're not quite able to express in words. But I do that from the Tolkien version. So specifically for me, I feel very called to spreading and trying to help reignite a love for cardinal virtues and the theological virtues. So, the theological virtues, we have faith, hope, charity, love. And cardinal, we have prudence, wisdom, justice, fortitude. And the two often feed into each other quite a bit. And so whenever I write a book or a book series, one of those, I'll pick one of them and they will be the book's theme or the series' entire theme. So I have one right now that's called Saga of Valor, and Valor is slightly different from Fortitude, because Fortitude is being able to endure with strength, where Valor is being able to be brave in battle. And it's about that shift to this character going from Valor to realizing there's a deeper strength of Fortitude. And I have another one that's about mercy, right? And looking at, in the Jewish root, you have 3 different versions of mercy. And so that book looks at Rosham, and that is literally the mercy womb, the place of mercy in terms of taking another and healing them and keeping them safe. And so that's what I try to do. And I think that allows me to write books that are that would have connected with me from when I was in the secular world, and hopefully have something that's a little that, where it's the reader walks away and they're thinking a little bit more about that. So I think that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I feel like I'm called to do.
Interesting. I love it. So in your writing, do you call out, cultural issues? And if you do, how do you balance that with offering hope and solutions rooted in faith? Is it typical that you focus on a virtue per book, or kind of, walk us through that?
Yeah. So it's very typical that I focus on a theme virtue through a book or a series. So I got a good one. I got a few coming out this fall. And one's going to be my first sci-fi. And that one's interesting because one of the core themes behind it is looking at abortion mixed with, if you were to get in it with biomods and, let's say, really advanced CRISPR. And so you have people being paid to abort their children as almost right up to the date of birth. But then that aborted flesh is reanimated by biogenome, like a genome company or that sort of thing. And then
Hmm.
because it is dead and reanimated, it belongs to them. So it's like kind of playing with a little bit of that idea of like, abortion and what can we, what is the cost of a body? What does it mean? What does life mean? If so, I think I kind of lost the thread there. I apologize for that. So
That's okay. Yeah, yeah. So you're calling out, a very hot issue that's been debated since the '70s now, and you're kind of doing it in a way that might hit the secular in a way that they're not thinking like, oh, he's preaching to me about abortion, but this book is teaching me about the value of human life. Do I understand that correctly?
right, yeah, exactly. Yes. So it's about, I always try to get in there, right, with something that that is important to that's happening maybe now, or something more subtle, and try and flip it on its head, look at it from a different light, right? Because if you have someone, that's a good example to continue with, but if you have someone who's very pro abortion, well, then maybe that gets them thinking about like, what what is life? Like, what is that thing that I'm just aborting? Like, because now in this, I'm extrapolating, imagining it as that potential being grown into something, and then who does that belong? And so I think you get a lot of inner dialogue going, and that's the beauty of not just fantasy, but any speculative fiction. Is same thing with comedy, right? You can talk about something in a way that is entertaining, thought provoking, and just disarms people. You know,
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, I love it, man. Love it. That sounds like a very interesting book. I might have to check it out myself, my friend. One last question here for you before we get to a couple action items, as I typically like to end this show. What advice would you give to young Christians who are feeling overwhelmed right now by the cultural shift away from biblical values? I know we're kind of seeing a swing back to the other way, but we're still kind of in this gray area. So what advice would you give young Christians?
yeah, and gosh, just because it's good now doesn't mean it can't swing back the other way, right?
Right. Right.
Especially when we live on that 4-year cycle. So this is, again, it sounds simple, like the prayer, but I really would recommend, like, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you feel like, gosh, like, what do I do in this world? Whether it's what do I do, or how do I handle this? I would say you should double down and figure out, like, what is your vocation? What is your calling? I think a lot of times, especially with you say young Christians, right? I think young people often feel like they need to go and make a difference. They need to figure out how they're going to do that. And from the moment that we are baptized and made anew, we are all given we're imparted with some sort of spiritual gift. And that doesn't mean we know what it is. And so figuring out, taking that time to do the vocation and figure out what that is, I think is the best way, because it's actionable. It's where your talents are going to be the most powerful. And it takes your eyes off of these things that are maybe a little bit of a distraction in your life to do what you're supposed to do, which I think is what the enemy wants, so that you can have those moments. And in order to figure out the vocation, you have to go into prayer. So yeah, figuring out that is what I would recommend. So
Yeah, that's good advice. Good advice. And that kind of leads me into the action item. Speaking of talents, figuring out what your talent is. What specific ways do you think Christians can use their talents to confront secular ideologies like you do in your work?
yeah, so I mean, it's going to be, gosh, it's that's going to be all over the map.
Sure.
I yeah. So, but I think some of the more practical ways is, I'm an introvert, but even as an introvert, you still have to have a community. So you need to plug into your community. You need to see where you're called. Where is it? Is it into how we think of evangelization? Is it actually going and talking to people with that very direct mission, or is your talent or your gift is it to make people feel that comfort? And so then you start inviting people and holding like a regular soup night that invites people in, and you start to change one person at a time. Maybe it's not you, but you're creating the atmosphere that does that. So I personally, I think it's a very quiet use of the gift for most people. And, you know, I'm going to kind of maybe jump ahead a little bit in where I'm thinking, but kind of going back to that vocations, I really think that a lot of people should spend time doing what we would call the discernment of spirits, which is something that one of the church, like St. Ignatius, came up with. And that's, you know, spending 30 days in a kind of rigorous sort of prayer. You could do fasting with it, but then also contemplative reflection with a journal to figure out what it is that your gifts are and your talents, so you can figure out where you're supposed to use them.
Love it. No, I'm glad that you said plug into your community. I think that's very important. I've talked about it with many guests on this show. We all agree, and I'm glad there's more Christians out there talking about it. It's like, well, you know, we're commanded to love our neighbors, but most of us have no idea who our neighbors are. Like, you know, host a soup night, whatever. You know, invite people to your house when you're at church. Just don't spend your time with them on Sundays or Saturdays, whatever. You know, invite them over on a Tuesday for dinner, or what have you. I think that is great advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I don't know if you've ever looked at Amish, for example. The Amish are a great example of community, in that they have a high, like, they send their youth away at some point to go experience the world. And then some don't come back, but a huge amount come back. And there's a couple different arguments you could come up with for it. But I have a buddy who he writes for a couple journals, political journals and things like that. And he spent extensive time on it. And one of the things that he found was the Amish do a really good job of creating a cohesive community that pulls together. And I'm sure there's a dark side to it that I don't know of. But in general, there's going to be there's this positive. And compare that with our communities, right? Like, you walk down the street, like you say, you don't know who your neighbors are. You don't need to rely on your neighbors in any meaningful way. Our houses, like, even the architecture of our houses are built so that your door is pretty far, and you cover it with a fence. So, like, we live in a city, but it's fragmented in terms of the relationships that pull it together. Like, I would argue in some cases, especially in big cities, you're more connected to your neighbor via economics than you are through any meaningful relationship. And so, yeah, if you are going to make a difference, one of the core things is going to be with other people. Nothing's done alone. And so you have to build that relationship. And so
100%. Fantastic advice. Last question for you, Isaac. How can our audience support or amplify Christian voices like yours who are addressing the culture through creative forums?
Oh, man. Okay, so there is this misnomer. I hear it a lot, and so I'm going to just snub it right now.
All right.
I keep seeing these messages where people are like, oh, Disney just put out Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and it has all these things, and it's awful. Where are the good? We need conservatives or whatever, or Christians to make this content really good. As if that doesn't exist. No, those people are there. They are. And the problem is some people don't know how to build a platform. Some people are pushed away. And so you're going to find a lot of creatives who are pushing and who are standing up for a lot of biblical values in their art, in the independent scene. And so personally, that's where I would start. I would go online and look for some, we all have Google. Now with AI, right, you can look up people. You can put in, hey, I want a Christian author who does this and this, and it does a pretty good job, right? So I would say don't assume that they're not there. They're there. And one of the best ways you can do is either reach out, let those people know, because like even if they're practicing patience, they still want to know, like, hey, this is actually having an effect. Like, this is having an effect. Like, let them know if you like their work, or if you want to purchase for them, that's great. And then I think that's on a small scale level, but on a big scale level, and this is one of the reasons I think we're starting to see more Christian stuff in the mainstream, is what was it? House of David came out on Amazon, and they say in it, hey, this is going to have some things that maybe aren't exactly from the Bible, but it's pretty good. Like, the show is really good. It was enjoyable. There's some violence, but all in all, it's one of those things that makes people curious. And so don't put poo on that. Like, watch it, if you like it, you vote with your wallet. Like, pay the money to watch that. Go, when The Chosen has its new, like the latest season, and they go out in the theater, go pay that, because it is a signal that you're sending. In the same way, like, if you don't go see a certain movie because you don't agree with the values, you're sending a signal. You're also sending a positive signal saying, hey, make more movies like this, make more shows like this. And suddenly it becomes cool. And was it the Daily Wire likes to say that politics is downstream of culture? Like, if you're creating a feedback loop to that culture saying, this is what we want, create more of it. So then Hollywood or whoever goes and creates more of it, and you keep saying, yes, 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 that helps make its way down into the zeitgeist of the younger people who are consuming it, which then they eventually go into schoolwork, they become politicians, whatever. And now they're carrying those values that you've introduced to them. And it's as simple as supporting the show or whatever.
Right. Love it. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Awesome advice all the way around on both the small scale and the large scale. And I think it's funny. Yeah. House of David, of course it has violence. You can't write an Old Testament story that doesn't have any violence. That's just, the Old Testament is filled with it. So, it is what it is. But, Isaac, this has been a great conversation, man. Thank you so much for joining the show and sharing your wisdom with us. Is there anything you want to promote? Websites, podcasts, books, promote away, my friend.
Yeah, dude. So you can find all of my stuff at IzaicYorks.com. Then my name is IZAICYORKS. And you can find all of my stuff there. I write too wide, so I don't generally stay on, platforms like Amazon. You can find my stuff there, but the best way is if you want to come support me there, you can buy a book, you can learn more about it, or you can join my newsletter and just find out when things are coming out. So I have 4 books coming out in November. And that's great. In my socials, you can find me on Instagram at Izaic Yorks, or Facebook. So
awesome. Folks, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share the show with everyone you know. And comment below. I want to know, tell me of your favorite Christian artists, whether it's music, authors, directors, actors. Let me know in the comments who some of your favorites are. You can find all my episodes on YouTube at Jeremiah Campana or on ChristiansForLiberty.com. That is the number 4. And you can find me on Rumble as well at Jeremiah Campana and on X at Jeremiah Campana. Isaac, would you be so kind to lead us out in prayer?
Absolutely. I hope you don't mind. So I thought that this would be fitting. It's something I've been really into. It's called it's the intro from the Today on Prayer. And I think it fits very well nicely with the culture. So
fair enough.
All right. Shall we? All right. You are God. We worship you. You are God. We acclaim you. You are the eternal Father, and all of creation worships you. We thank you, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Folks, don't forget Jesus and freedom over everything. Till next time, God bless.